Oh, well, hi there. Welcome to Liberty.me. I'm Lucy Steigerwald. I'm here with Sheldon Richman. Par usual.
Hello.
You know Sheldon from all manner of good stuff, like previously the Freeman and Freedom Daily, currently his own free association blog, Center for a Stateless Society, and Reason now twice a week. So that's good stuff. Sheldon, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. You
Well,
mean glad I'm there. We're not in the same place, so you're glad I'm
uh,
there.
that's a pedantic but fair enough qualification.
Sure.
All right, so what did you want to talk about tonight? Like, and how long do you want to talk? I'm gonna let
Oh,
you.
I'll just say enough to kick things off because I'd rather have it be discussion, and I hope there are enough people out there who will type out questions and comments. So the title that I gave, which I noticed they picked up, was what did I say? Yeah, I mean I got the right order. To quote Rick Perry, oops. It's the Iran deal, Israel and the U.S. hegemon and U.S. hegemony. So I
Yes.
figured it's just a big wrap, umbrella topic because there's a lot going on with that. So just to kick it off, we know that what was it last week after I don't know close to 2 years of negotiations, something like that. Uh, an Iran nuclear agreement was reached. And this was between Iran on the one side and what they call the P5+1 on the other, which means the permanent, P coming from permanent members of the Security Council plus Germany. Germany lost the war and therefore is not a permanent member of the Security Council, but still a major player in NATO. So they were involved in negotiations that were up and down, fits and starts, and there was an interim agreement last year, an interim framework, which looked like it was progress and looks like they had made progress. Uh, and then there were times when Obama was saying there was less than the 50-50 chance there was going to be an agreement. So it really was keeping people on the edge of their seats day to day. Everybody was scrutinizing every little word that John Kerry said and what the officials from Iran said. The background to all this, of course, is that the U.S. has charged that Iran has a nuclear weapons program. And I want to start off, number one, by saying I don't accept that premise. And if you want to know why, I recommend a very good book to you, because there was a guy who literally wrote the book on the subject, and that's Gareth Porter and his book Manufactured Crisis. Subtitle something like The Truth of the Iranian Nuclear Scare. He presents overwhelming evidence, very well documented. He's a very good, he's an award-winning historian and investigative journalist, to show that Iran has not been interested in having a nuclear weapon. U.S. and military intelligence, Israeli intelligence acknowledge that. Twice there have been national intelligence estimates from the U.S. Intelligence community. I love that word, community. Do they have a pool? I want to know. Does the intelligence community have a pool and tennis courts? And it's a community. It all sounds so nice, right? It's a community. What kind of threat is a community? So anyway, that's an aside. But I digress. Anyway, the hardcore intelligence says they never were building a bomb, that they have a peaceful nuclear power industry, which began under the Shah with U.S. help. So it goes back to that. Anyway, I won't go into details there, but except to say the whole thing is built on a false premise, which the U.S. government well knows. But they went with it anyway. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia and Israel and a few other countries around the Persian Gulf have a lot to gain by demonizing Iran. So that's kind of the background. But anyway, put that aside for the moment. Let's assume Iran had taken steps that were threatening in the way of building a nuclear weapon. They went to the table after years of sanctions, economic sanctions, and after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the U.S. froze a whole bunch, billions of dollars of Iranian assets that have just been held, in escrow, that Iran has not had access to, and then they've been mounting these sanctions, which has made it hard to get goods and services and medicine from outside of Iran, and then they got excluded from the international finance system. So if you were to travel to Iran, you couldn't use your credit card. So of course that discourages anybody from traveling to Iran. All kinds of ways of excluding them from the international commercial system, which has been devastating. So Iran wanted to get these sanctions off, And even though they insisted they weren't making a weapon, they said, look, okay, we'll nevertheless give you any, all kinds of safeguards so we can have economic normalization. And then after this long drawn out set of negotiations, they finally came up with this agreement, which on the one hand will require Iran to reduce its stockpile of enriched uranium, none of which is at the level of weapons grade, which is something like 90% enriched. They only have gone up to like 19 point something, which is useful for both power and medical isotopes. So it's that can be legitimate. Anyway, they're going to give up 98% of what they have enriched over the years. They're going to get rid of 2/3 of their centrifuges, which are the spinning devices that enrich uranium. They're going to change a heavy water reactor. They're going to actually stop construction of a heavy water reactor, which would have yielded plutonium as a byproduct, which, although it would have taken a complicated process, could at least potentially, in theory, be used to end up making a bomb. Not that they said they wanted one, but it's just a natural byproduct of a heavy water reactor. They're not going to have a heavy water reactor. They're going to have all kinds of intrusive inspections 24/7 by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has been inspecting Iran for years because it is a signer, and this is a very important point, of the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. It's been a signer for some time. I think the Shah actually signed it. So they've been under inspection continuously by the IAEA, which has always certified that every speck, every atom of uranium in Iran's stockpile is where it ought to be and has not been diverted to military purposes. I mean, year after year they certified this, or they probably do it more frequently than that. And in return, there's going to be some lifting. There's going to be lifting of sanctions when the usual authorities, UN has sanctions too, is satisfied that the agreement is being complied with. Also, there's going to be a release of, I think it may be 30 billion. I'm not sure, of Iranian assets. I don't know if that's the complete amount, but anyway, there'll be some release of these Iranian assets that have been held as cash, and now we're on our way. But of course, Congress has to go over this because they passed a bill saying, and Obama went along saying they have, I think it was 60 days. It's not a treaty, so they don't need like 2/3 ratification in the Senate. They can vote it up or down. If they vote it down, Obama can veto it, and then if they can get the 2/3 needed to override or veto, they can do that. So there's still a little uncertainty, but that's how things stand right now. So I'll stop because I've talked a lot, and I'm sure more stuff will come out as we talk. I hope so.
Well, first and foremost, I'm curious what you think of the treaty in terms of libertarian best case and in terms of what you expected in the real world in which we live.
Yeah, the article that I did on this last week, I think it was last week, that's on my blog, and Reason reposted it. It was called 2 Cheers for the Iran Agreement, and the reason that I use that common phrase 2 cheers means that I said it's really good for 2 reasons, and we ought to be happy. It certainly makes the chance of war, which has always been in the background, a combined U.S.-Israel, mainly U.S. war against Iran. It makes that much less likely now. The U.S., even after the signing of the agreement, Defense, or I call Secretary of War Ash Carter, he's still rattling the saber even after the signed agreement, saying all options are still on the table. Why would you be talking like this? Well, no, one reason is he's going to Israel. He's visiting Israel. So it makes it less likely. That's a very good thing. That would have killed a lot of innocent people, and it disrupted a lot of the world. It would have, I think, set the Middle East aflame. But in terms of oil prices, even aside from those core horrors, the whole world would be affected. And the second advantage is that the economic warfare against Iran will begin to come to an end, which is what sanctions are. Sanctions are recognized in international law as war, as a form of war. We call them sanctions. They don't sound quite as bad. Right. But so those things will be lifted, assuming there are no hitches. The downside was, I think, what you were getting at from a libertarian point of view, it really just reasserts the U.S. as the hegemon. I mean, why should the U.S. be sitting in judgment of Iran, given its record? And I don't just mean the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on Japan, on innocent civilians in 1945. I mean everything else that's going on. support for death squads in Latin America, all the stuff it's been doing in the Middle East, supporting dictators and corrupt and vicious, oppressive monarchs, total support for Israel's subjugation of the Palestinians. I mean, I have a long paragraph like laying all that stuff out, including the overthrow of the Iranian government in 1953. Yeah. Let's bring Iran into this. Right, 1953. One reason they hate us is because the CIA helped overthrow a democratically elected secular left-of-center prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh, and then restored the power of the brutal Shah, the monarch, who's an autocrat. Mm-hmm. When he got overthrown in '79, well, the people that overthrew him weren't too happy about the United States, which had, put the Shah back in power and kept them there for 25, 26 years. So when they're yelling "Death to America, Death to America," which is supposed to be this great evidence that they want to attack us with nukes, no, it's nothing of the sort. It means they have a grudge, and it's, well, they don't need to cry "Death to America" because, I live in America, so
as do I.
Don't hurt me. I'm sympathetic to the Iranian cause here. Not to the government. It's a theocracy. I wouldn't want to live under it. However, as I would point out, if I had a choice between living in Tehran or Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, there's no question which one I'd pick. Mm-hmm. And there's no question about which a woman should pick. There are women doctors who drive cars in Tehran. Find that for me in Riyadh. There's a thriving Jewish community in Tehran, which is ancient. It's been there forever. Before the Muslims were there. It's ancient. And they have as much freedom as any other Iranian. I'm not saying it's a free country. It's not libertaria. But it looks a lot better than our good old friend, Saudi Arabia. So.
Meanwhile, just today, I noticed, I think it's from today or the last few days, an article on National Review Online which pulls the William Crystal and et al. Cliche about this, with a straight face, this is 1938, Munich, Chamberlain, just every hot cliche, but specifically this time about the Iran deal.
Is anybody keeping track about how many 1938s there have been since 1938?
I swear somebody did that. Somebody I didn't think was as funny and as pointed as that. They actually tracked the number of crystals in particular. It was. I should look that up. But yes.
It's really funny because I just finished a piece which I'll post tomorrow, saying we need a new paradigm case of chutzpah, which of course is the Jewish Yiddish word for goal, right? Mm-hmm. So the standard paradigm, and maybe everybody's already heard this before, I'll repeat it. It comes out of a book called The Joy of Yiddish by Leo Roston, which is a very funny book about the charming language of Yiddish, where he says the great example of chutzpah is where a man has just been convicted of murdering both his parents, and he throws himself on the mercy of the court on the grounds that he's an orphan. Okay, that's chutzpah, right? That would be a good case of chutzpah. Well, I think there's a new, better case of chutzpah, a new, better paradigm we should be using from now on. It's the Israeli government asking for compensation for this Iran agreement. So the foreign defense minister is going to be talking to Ash Carter in Israel, I guess he's there now, about being compensated. No, don't forget, they're getting $3 billion a year, right, in military aid from the United States, U.S. taxpayers. They have been since 1978 or 9 when Carter signed the Camp David Accord. On top of that, they want new compensation is the word, compensation. But it's ridiculous because even putting aside what I said about the fact that there is no nuclear weapons program in Iran, leave that aside. Let's accept Netanyahu's story that they're building a weapon. Why would Israel need to be compensated? We ought to be compensated because if you accept Netanyahu's premise, the threat has been radically diminished.
Right.
I just said they have to give up almost 100% of their enriched uranium, 2/3 of their centrifuges. Even their research on new centrifuges is severely restricted. All these inspections, even from non-nuclear military sites. Now it's true that they can't get immediately in. The inspectors can't say we want to see that site, and so therefore we get right in. This is for a non-nuclear military site. They do have to, I don't know, petition, put in an application. Iran can make a case for why Uh, the inspectors shouldn't go in. That then goes before this commission, which is set up by the P5+1, and there's, I guess, some sort of internal appeals. But eventually, Iran could be, within 24 days, Iran could be overruled and they have to go in. No, what other country, would the United States ever permit military sites, including the many around the world that it maintains, would let a foreign or a committee of foreigners come in and with free reign and visit military sites? Of course not. And yet that's what the U.S. was demanding, and that's what they get. So Netanyahu ought to be thanking Obama if he really believes that there's a. I don't think he really believes there's a threat. Too many military people in Iran, in Israel, have said, I wouldn't even be worried if they got a bomb. First of all, what would they do with one bomb? It's no small matter to come up with one bomb and a way to deliver it. Okay, that's not some piece of cake. Even if it's not some piece of yellow cake, to use a neocon joke, pun. Even if you have an enrichment, you got to test it. I mean, it's not a simple thing. Plus, you got to deliver it. So Israel, which never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and is not subject to inspection, have upwards of 200 warheads, some of which are on invulnerable submarines, which means they have a powerful second strike capability. So even if somebody launched a first strike at Israel, they have offshore delivery vehicles, right, to obliterate anybody. So as the Ayatollah and other Iranian officials have said, what would we want one for? What would it do? At most, it would maybe give them some deterrent, but who knows if it would even give that. So it's very clear that they've decided any benefit is not worth the headaches and the costs, and that's why I think Gareth Porter's case is so convincing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I've heard from these types is that it puts off. I'm sorry, no, 10 years from now, it's putting off this problem that they see is happening more or less, and it's not enough. They want more overseeing. Presumably, they want to completely destroy Iran's ability to have any kind of nuclear medicine, because fuck people in Iran with cancer and things like that, I presume. I mean, I don't know. It seems like people are waiting for something, a more severe deal than this.
Look, the crystal people, folks, and everybody in that broad camp, and that includes the Israel lobby, they want regime change. Let's be really blunt about it.
Yeah.
They want regime change. They want a sock puppet, a puppet regime, somebody friendly like the Shah, to keep a lid on Iran. That's what they really want. They don't outright say that, although some of them say they want war. Joshua Moravchik and John Bolton both had op-eds, one in the New York Times, one in the Washington Post in June or May, calling for a war, saying, what are we waiting for? War is the only thing that's going to fix this. So they want war and regime change. If they could get regime change without war, I guess they take that. Yeah, but I think they like war too. So there's that. You made another point I was going to answer. So I don't think there's any reasoning with the crystal types, because they only want one thing, and they will continue to lie about the Iranian threat. They'll also say, okay, it's not just the bomb. He even admitted they gave up a bomb that they never had. Mm-hmm. He said, oh, great, so they get all this cash and give up something they never had. Thank you for admitting they weren't they didn't have a bomb or were going for it. But here's the thing. You were mentioning the terms, 10 years. Mm-hmm. Some of the things have these time limits, 10, 15, 20 years, when like the ban on research, or when they could start acquiring centrifuges. You're right. Those expire 10 years and further out. But they still are a signer of the NPT, and as long as they are, they're subject to inspections, and they've always allowed the inspections. If they were to quit the NPT, which is what North Korea did before it built its bomb, of course there'd be we'd all know that. We'd know it left the NPT. So it's bogus and very misleading to say, well, there's a time limit, so in 10 years. You have to also look at this term breakout capability. That's a very key term, right? You'll hear the defenders of the agreement say, well, the breakout capability goes from 3 months, which it is today, to a year. They'll say a year. From now on, it would take them a year. Even if they quit the NPT, it would take them a year to be. Now, what's breakout mean? Breakout simply means you have the knowledge and you have the infrastructure to enrich uranium enough highly enriched uranium, to produce enough highly enriched uranium, which is something like 90%, to make a bomb. So they're always going to have the knowledge. So what are they going to do? What do they want to do? Hypnotize them and make them forget everything that they ever knew about? Yeah, Israel has tried that. Israel has assassinated Iranian nuclear scientists. Now, of course, it hasn't worked. They find other ones. They have other ones. But how do you prevent breakout capability? Because that's just knowledge and the ability to enrich. And I have to say this, under the NPT, I don't say this as libertarian, just now observing the current legality, any NPT member is, quote, entitled to have a peaceful nuclear power or nuclear medicine program, which can include enrichment of uranium. And so the enrichment of uranium is a totally bogus issue because in 2010, Iran, because the U.S. was interfering with any attempt at Iran to enrich uranium, it was trying to throw up all kinds of obstacles. Iran, showing its cooperation, cut a deal with Turkey and Brazil. At first, Obama actually called for this, which said, we won't enrich uranium. We will simply send you uranium, Turkey and Brazil, and you will send us, I think it was 3% enriched, which is what for fuel rods and things like that. Obama vetoed the agreement, the treaty, because they didn't want a peaceful resolution of this. I mean, eventually came around because the sanctions didn't stop Iran from acquiring centrifuges. Between 2003 and 2013, when they agreed to sit down, they acquired tens of thousands of centrifuges. The sanctions didn't do anything to bring Iran to the table. As Gareth Porter points out, I think it was Gareth who said, no, it was Mohammed Fahimi who writes about this stuff and is a frequent guest on Scott Horton's show. It was Iran's centrifuges that brought the U.S. to the table. It wasn't U.S. sanctions that brought Iran to the table.
So, at the end of the day, this is just America or certain Americans in Israel wanting Iran to be a puppet. I mean, I don't know if that's just the easiest way to describe it. Is that what they really want without the hassle of a war if they just did whatever we say, I guess? I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
They're almost saying in those terms.
Saudi Arabia is a party in this too, so we should name them.
Yeah.
They, in fact, are tacit allies with Israel. We should remember that, against Iran, to a point where they're both siding with al-Qaeda affiliates against Iran in Syria. Israel has been giving medical attention to al-Nusra warriors, guerrillas who have been hurt, near their border in Syria. And they have declared that they, it depends on what official you talk to. Some officials have said, well, we just like the chaos, so we're not really siding with anybody. But when they've actually taken actions, it's been more to the side of the crazy Sunni types, the Wahhabis, which is not far from ISIS. Okay, there hasn't been outright support for ISIS from them, but the U.S. is on ISIS' side against Assad, but it's on Iran's side in Iraq against so it's really kind of crazy. I mean, tacitly they won't admit they're working with Iran, but Iran makes a very convenient bête noire, and Israel needs a bête noire, and I'm convinced the reason Israel needs it is because if it couldn't make a case that there was an existential threat against Israel, and there is not an existential threat, but if everybody knew that, especially if the American people knew that, then they might start wondering about the Palestinians' plight. Look how useful Iran is in keeping people's minds off the Palestinians, because Israel and its supporters here can say, hey, we live in a really rough neighborhood.
Right. You
don't live here. You don't know what it's like. In fact, when 9/11 happened and those towers were brought down, Netanyahu was quoted saying something like, this is kind of a good thing because now the Americans will understand what we lived through. He had to kind of walk it back a little bit. But it was useful to them. I'm not saying they were behind it, but that was useful because you can say, see, Americans, you got a taste of what we have to live. So don't push us on the Palestinians. We live here. You don't. We're surrounded by all these hostile forces. And if Americans ever learned that They may be, I don't know, in their minds hostile, in their hearts hostile, but they don't do anything about it, and they don't have the capability to do anything about it. And Saudi Arabia in the 90s made a grand bargain with Israel and the U.S. They said, let's sit down, we'll recognize two states, well, let's get all this crap out of the way. And in 2003, Iran embraced the Saudi initiative to recognize Israel, to sit down and resolve everything, including the nukes. And you know what George Bush said in 2003? Go away, you bother me. We're not talking to you. In fact, it was delivered. The deal was delivered by the Swiss, and the Swiss got berated for even delivering it to the U.S. Don't even tell it. Don't never bring us such an offer again from the Iranians. So that's the U.S. posture. You know.
I feel like I haven't seen a lot of hawks and such overtly talk about the Saudi Arabia being our allies thing. I don't know, if they want to get one over on Obama, sometimes they might point out, oh, look, who was executed in Saudi Arabia today. But there's this caginess where they won't ask, basic questions why Saudi Arabia is good. I mean, why Egypt good, Iran the devil practically.
Right.
I mean, there's this just forever evasiveness that
it's really weird. I mean, I watched a YouTube, which I've seen before, and you can find it. I put it up on Facebook. YouTube video of interviews with leaders and members of the Jewish community in Tehran. Like I said, it's a very old community, and Israel has offered $10,000 per Iranian Jew to come to Israel, and these people were saying, we're not a commodity. We're not for sale. We're Iranians. We love Iran, and we can practice our religion. So basically, they were saying, shut up. It's a really moving video.
I would like to see that.
They have synagogues that are open. Look, even when Ahmadinejad, who I believe was just like being a troublemaker, who, by the way, had no authority over military or foreign policy. Okay, the president of Iran only deals with the domestic economy, which he helped screw up, of course. He's a statist. He's not pro free market, but he had no say whatsoever over nuclear policy, over whether to build weapons, where to send troops, whatever. But he was I think he liked poking his thumb in the eyes of the Israeli leadership, and he took this, he made despicable statements about the Holocaust, which I think are nonsense. Denial, I believe, is nonsensical. I've written about it, I've read about it, and we could talk about that someday. But I don't even know if he believes it. It doesn't matter. And obviously, people are hurt by that. The leader of the Jewish community, maybe the head of the big synagogue there, not only wrote to the government to say, this is hurtful, don't do this. He had an interview, I think, in a British paper saying Ahmadinejad is wrong. Nothing happened to him. Did they come and take him away in the middle of the night? No. Did the Iranian Gestapo come and kill him, or take him away, or put him on show trial? No. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, under Ahmadinejad, the Jewish hospital there, which is one of 4 Jewish charitable hospitals in the world, continued to get government subsidies, like all other hospitals. And by the way, the Jewish hospital has Muslims on the staff and Muslims in the hospital beds. It's not like an exclusive Jewish thing. It's just, I think, a Jewish hospital. They treat anybody. You'll see somebody in that video where the head of admissions is saying, we don't ask your religion, we ask where it hurts. So this is stuff that CNN's not interested in. We know that Fox isn't interested in it. MSNBC's not interested in it. You've got to look far and wide to find stuff like this.
Well, one thing, this reminds me, I was talking to Eric Garris from antiwar.com about this last week, and about in respect to the Iran deal, what the media was doing was, what are various politicians / potential 2016 candidates saying about the Iran deal? There was a lot more of that filter as opposed to, what does this actually say?
Yeah.
What might this mean? The level of attention span and just sort of realization that there are people over there just like over here, just with some variations. It was about, what's Graham saying, what's Rubio saying, what's Rand Paul saying, and that's certainly an example of the problem with how this is looked at. How this selfishness that I think is, natural to some extent, but America absolutely is off the charts with it.
Right, and saying the kind of things that Gareth Porter can say and support is considered beyond the pale,
Right.
because the most dovish people they brought on still would talk about how valuable this is to make sure Iran never develops a nuclear weapon. I mean, the people who otherwise are very, very good either didn't want to challenge the premise or themselves don't question the premise. And I'm talking about even somebody I admire like Hillary Mann Leverett, who worked in Bush's CIA and National Security Council. She's a Iran expert. She and her husband Flint Leverett quit the National Security Council over the Iraq War. They're very principled people. They've been on Scott's show before. But even when she comes on, CNN does bring her on once in a while. She talks up the agreement. I think I haven't seen her since the agreement was signed, but she was talking up the process as a way to make sure Iran never. I mean, she's favorable to Iran, not that she likes the regime, but she doesn't think it's out to rule the world or kill us or kill Jews or even kill Israelis specifically. But she still leaves that premise there. I don't hear her challenging that. So I've never heard anybody brought on one of these major networks who would, and Gareth Porter would be the best candidate because, like I said, he wrote the book, to say, wait a second, why don't we take a step back, show me where Iran has even made a move toward a nuclear weapon, and then cite these national intelligence estimates and this other hard evidence that show that the intelligence agencies are not convinced that there's a weapons program.
I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong in that I have a general aversion to nuclear weapons. So I think, in theory, why can't Iran have a nuclear weapon when Israel has, I don't know how many, America? And I totally subscribe to America, the only country to ever use them on people, gets to decide, is just an inherently rather sickening. But at the same time, nuclear weapons I'm not happy they exist, so I'm not sure if I should be sort of embracing the fair is fair aspect or just being happy when, there are fewer nuclear weapons.
That's a very good point. Yeah, fewer is better. The other thing we haven't mentioned here that Crystal and the others like to at least imply, and I guess sometimes they actually say it outright, is they try to portray the Iranian leadership as the mad mullahs, right? They're insane. They're suicidal. They're apocalyptic. They're looking for the end of times or whatever. And there's no evidence of that. They have not acted that way. They've acted conservative and self-preservation of both the regime and their own lives and the country itself. It seems to be number one on their minds. There's no reason to think that if they got a bomb that, the consequences be damned, let's go just drop it on Tel Aviv. We don't care if we get wiped out hours later. That's ridiculous. In fact, it's very revealing. I've posted this video a few times. You can find it on YouTube. One of the top neoconservative foreign policy thinkers who's at AEI, her name is Danielle Pletka. There's a very revealing interview with her where she says, the problem with Iran, this is pretty close to verbatim, the problem with Iran is not that they'll get a bomb and use it. The problem is they'll get a bomb and they won't use it. And then all the people who said that Iran was not a problem will say, see, we told you. That's what she says is the number one problem, that they won't use it. And therefore, people will say, see, they are a responsible power. And
therefore they'll get more of them, and it'll be normalized.
No, she doesn't say that. No, they'll be respectable. No, they'll be back to they'll have climbed out of this hole the U.S. put them in and be a respectable power. Don't forget, again, not thinking of this so much as libertarian, because you and I would condemn this, but Iran's been around a very long time, right? It goes way back, biblical times. They have a very well-educated middle class. They would have a very highly developed economy. Of course, we've helped to screw it up. Of course, their own leaders have too. They have a big population. What are they, like 2-3 times the population of Iraq, and much more land mass than Iraq? they're going to be a major player under this current state system as it is, even though you and I would like to see that come to an end. It's not going to come to an end too soon. So, just to be realistic about it, there's no way they're not going to be a major player in the Middle East. So for U.S. to be proposing a policy or pushing a policy which Saudi Arabia, the other Gulf states, and Egypt too, and Israel applaud, but for the U.S. to be pushing a policy to contain Iran as an influential power in the Middle East would be like Iran proposing to make the U.S. an uninfluential power in the Western Hemisphere. By putting pressure on Mexico and Canada. It's a joke. It's no way to do it unless you bomb them to smithereens and put in a new Shah who's on the
Hence,
US payroll.
a few people hankering to do that.
Here's the other thing. I mean, that's the only kind of thing. That's the only thing that makes sense of the Iraq invasion. Everybody knew that if you overthrow Saddam Hussein was a Sunni, although he was a secularist, a Sunni ruling a majority Shiite country, right? 2/3 of the country is Shiite. Iraq. Iran is Shiite. So there's some affinity between the Shiites of Iraq, who were, I wouldn't say they outright repressed. It wasn't like Saddam Hussein was slaughtering them usually, but they were discriminated against in civil service, all that kind of stuff, right? They were kind of second-class citizens. And the Sunni minority got all the goodies. So everybody knew that if you overthrow Saddam Hussein, Iraq is going to end up being Sunni Shiite ruled and close to Iran. Everybody knew it. And the original, the first president, Nouri al-Maliki, the guy that eventually they had to kick out for a guy who's not much better, Nouri al-Maliki was handpicked by the Iranian leaders to be the candidate, the guy who became the president. So everybody knew that if the U.S. invades Iraq and topples Saddam Hussein, the nemesis of Iraq, don't forget of Iran. Don't forget Saddam Hussein invaded Iran in 1980. The U.S. helped. He used chemical weapons against Iran. Iran never got chemical weapons and retaliated. It could have. It had the breakout capability to create Iranian chemical weapons. It never did that. Anyway, so we topple the nemesis of Iran. Were they really surprised that Iran now has more influence and scope once Saddam is out of the picture? Who could be surprised? Was Wolfowitz and those guys really surprised? No. So why would they take out Iraq if it's going to help Iran? The plan, well, of course, was, and they weren't able to pull it off. The only thing that makes sense to this is that Iran was the next step, right? Or maybe Assad and Syria was the next step, and then Iran was the third step. Otherwise, why would you give Iraq to Iran if you're planning not to do anything to Iran? It makes no sense. These people aren't idiots, Wolfowitz and those guys. They may be evil, but they're not stupid.
Yeah. I can never, I mean, that's disturbingly compelling, but I'm never sure what I think the motivation is, because maybe if we're not talking Wolfowitz level, the people actually planning this sort of thing, but, the National Review people, the people who appear to be less insane even than William Crystal, but are still completely on the hawk side, particularly in this case. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with them, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and whether it's just sort of a fear of Iran, a fear of this country that has a different dominant religion, that is a theocracy officially. America is what we know, and that's somewhere else, and they say mean things about us, and there's just this it's almost this childish terror of them that I don't know if it's conniving, in everyone's case here. I don't know if they're down with the Wolfowitz plan to, topple everywhere. They just are afraid of everywhere that professes to be an enemy of the United States.
Yeah, the question is, what's the nature of the fear? It's not fear of an attack.
Yeah.
It's not an existential fear or fear of existential threat. It's you have to look at what is the vision of American hegemony. It's where we call the shots. What George H.W. Bush, after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and at first George Bush wasn't inclined to do anything about it, but Thatcher told him, "Don't go wobbly on us, George." So then he became an interventionist, and one of the words he uttered, which I think is so telling, is Saddam Hussein has to understand this: what we say goes. 4 very important words, right? Is that 4? what we say goes. Yeah, 4. And I think that's the vision of the planners, of the Wolfowitzes, of the Rumsfelds, of George W. Bush, all those people. Well, George W. Bush is hardly one of the brain trusts, right? Cheney. We will not tolerate a situation where what we say doesn't go. And Iran is, if Iran is not somehow crippled or ruled by a puppet, it's going to be a non-aligned, very, very influential power in the Middle East, and we don't want that.
But
our guys are Israel, Saudi, Egypt, and the other Gulf states, Kuwait, the Emirates, Bahrain. And we are not going to tolerate a major non-aligned power.
Yeah.
We meaning, the Kagans and the war planners, the whole brain trust.
But I mean, if a place becomes an ally of the U.S., then we don't rule them per se, but it seems like if they really wanted, the idealized America to have an influence on, say, Cuba as another place, a lot of people having fits over the renewed diplomatic relations.
Yeah.
They don't even believe in the Bastiat or whomever actually said that, saying of trade is going to help these people, trade's going to loosen the grip. I keep hearing about North Korea and just, bits of culture that get smuggled in there and people getting more and more of a clear idea of what a twisted society they live in. And these people don't even advocate for that. I mean, they don't appear to be interested in even scraping out a nice sort of positive thing where America influences the rest of the world with its semi-freedom. It's so much worse than that with them. There's nothing, I don't know, it's just...
Well, I don't think they would want a non-aligned liberal Iran.
Yeah.
They would rather have an autocratic, aligned, liberal Iran, like they had with the Shah. That's what I think they wanted. They were very critical of Carter, that he didn't give the Shah enough support, although he did give him a lot of support. The Shah was also dying of cancer back then. But look, the year before the Shah fell, Carter and his wife were celebrating New Year's Eve in Tehran, toasting the Shah. Long life to the Shah. So that's what they would want. Mm-hmm. They would not want a liberal but non-aligned Iran that was not in the U.S. camp. That doesn't, liberalism does in any, in the best sense, does not rank high in the neocons list of priorities. I just don't see any evidence of that.
Look at Egypt. You get mad when you call them neocons, though.
Look at Egypt.
For some reason.
When Mubarak was in trouble, and everybody knew he wasn't going to last. He had how many people in the streets? Hillary Clinton was saying, "Well, he's a good friend of Bill and Bill and me," and she was Secretary of State. They stood by Mubarak until they knew he had no chance at all, and then they supported the idea of letting the torturer in chief, Omar Suleiman was his name, succeed Mubarak. They thought, okay, maybe this will fly. We'll get rid of Mubarak. We'll just put in his second in command, his torturer. But that didn't work. And then, what did they do when Morsi got overthrown? After, Morsi was elected, Muslim Brotherhood, but the Muslim Brotherhood had given up violence 50 years earlier. According to Daniel Pipes, one of the leading neocon experts on the Middle East, he said, I saw him on TV at the time saying, they gave up violence 50 years ago. They were kind of older men. They hadn't, they weren't firebrands. And the U.S. stood by, not that they should have intervened, but they didn't object when the military overthrew Morsi and elected government. When there had been a great government, certainly was no libertarian policies as far as I know. But they I think they did some token suspension of aid, which was then, renewed eventually. And even though it was a military coup, under U.S. law, we're not supposed to give military aid, to a country that's under a military coup. But
that's a good one.
But aside from a little delay, suspension, they're getting, they get a huge deal, second only to Israel, which came out of the Camp David.
Right. I mean,
we bought them. Carter did.
Even these people know that you're not always going to have a George Bush in power, or God forbid, a Dick Cheney nightmare scenario. You have someone like Obama who, horrifyingly enough, these people consider to be a dove. But I mean, their grand conspiratorial sounding nightmare plan, that you suggested. I don't know. It doesn't work in America, thankfully. I mean, as bad as America can be, we don't have the attention span even to put this sort of plan into place. I guess I don't know.
It's really weird because it doesn't make sense if you're looking at it from the outside. It doesn't make sense. Why would they be doing this? It's costing the American people. It cost a lot of lives, first of all, of Americans, not to mention all the lives on the other side. What, 1 million killed in Iraq, in Syria, which the U.S. helped inflame that civil war and turn it into the major conflagration that it is. And it did that by declaring open season on Assad, which just brought in all the jihadists from neighboring Iraq. They said, oh, great. The U.S. now says Assad can't stay in power. Let's head there. Yeah. And they're ready to capitalize on the fall of Assad. And the U.S., of course, says it's fighting both sides. We're fighting. We're fighting. I don't know if we're fighting al-Nusra these days, which is the Al-Qaeda affiliate. We're supposedly fighting ISIS, but we're also fighting Assad. So we're like in the middle between the two, big parties, and somehow we're fighting both.
And the 8 people, the 8 fighters who are against both are our allies if we can only find them. And certainly the country that, trained the Mujahideen and was allied with Saddam Hussein 5 minutes ago can be trusted to figure out who the good guy in Syria is. That seems really feasible.
And let's not leave. We have to mention the name Libya at least once, which was one of Hillary's great projects. Let's hope that comes up a lot during the campaign, which would be going on right now. Hillary and her 2 compatriots, what's her name, Susan Rice and Samantha Power, pushed a reluctant Obama to go into Libya and decapitate the government and overthrow Gaddafi with air power, and then he got killed on the side of the road in the most brutal way. Don't forget, George Bush had brought Gaddafi in from the cold. They became friends again because he sold off his junk, which he claimed was potential nuclear weapons making stuff. It was like junk he bought at a garage sale across the street from where I live, I think. It was a bunch of metal, and said, hey, we can turn this into a nuclear power. So they said, okay, look, we'll give you money to get rid of it, and you can be our buddy again. So, and then that's what happens when you become. That's what happens when you give up a nuclear even a potential nuclear capability long in the future and become a friend of the U.S. That's when they come in to overthrow you. Same with that's a lesson to Iran that people should think of. Saddam Hussein got overthrown. He didn't have nukes. Libya got overthrown. Gaddafi didn't have nukes. We haven't gone in and overthrown Kim Jong-un or whatever his name is. He has a nuke. So what does that tell Iran? Now, doesn't it tell Iran, I better get a nuke? No, they haven't done it.
Yeah.
And I'll say to their credit. But isn't that the message we're getting? If you don't want to get overthrown, get a nuke. Isn't that the message?
That's a good point. A disturbingly good point. These people do not think about what Iran and its, hardliners and less so, and all of its citizens, they don't think about what they're thinking. They don't think about how they might react to America's history of intervention, how deeply untrustworthy America must seem to Iran for very good reason. And to acknowledge that is not to say you want, the hardliners of Iran to run the world and to come into America, and you wouldn't rather live in better by comparison kind of America. Like, to acknowledge Iran's reasons for distrust, to me, is not to acknowledge anything besides that simple fact that they are human beings over there. There's this history, and they can't do it. They will never admit that Iran has.
They've not attacked anybody. They've not attacked anybody in a couple of 100 years.
Is that really true?
One thing the neocons will say. One thing the neocons will say. Well, I've read that in many places. I can't think of a. They might have gotten some involved in some neighboring country under the Shah, but of course he was our guy. He was our son of a bitch. The Shah. I wouldn't count that.
Yeah.
But anyway, the crystal types say, well, look, okay, maybe the bomb is not the big thing, but now they're going to get $30 billion or whatever it is in these frozen assets, unfrozen assets, which they'll then use to fuel their march in the Middle East, right? Their aggressive march. They're on the march, and they'll say, look at Yemen, look at Iraq, look at Syria. And I would say, yeah, look at them. How does that show Iran on some sort of aggressive march? Let's look at Iraq. I already talked about Iraq. The U.S. handed Iraq to Iran. That's hardly an aggressive move by Iran.
Yeah.
The U.S. went in, fought a war of aggression, overthrew the Shiite Sunni, and everybody knew it was going to end up then a close ally of Iran. So that hardly shows aggressive intent, unless they were paying George Bush to attack Saddam Hussein. I don't think they were. Okay, what about Syria? Well, Syria is a longtime ally. Assad's a longtime ally of Iran because he's sort of the opposite of Iraq. He's sort of he's from a Shiite sect called the Alawites that rule a majority Sunni country. Don't forget, all these countries are artificial. They were set up by the British and the French after World War I. So these things weren't. God didn't make these back in the days of Moses. Anyway. So he's been an Iranian ally for a very long time, who's now under assault by both the U.S., by Al Qaeda, by Islamic State, al-Nusra, the Al Qaeda guys, the Islamic State. So for them to be helping Assad or standing by Assad is hardly anything new, and so therefore can't be evidence of an Iran on the march. Because it's basically Obama who kind of declared war on Assad by saying he's got to go, he and Hillary. Okay, what about Yemen? They point to Yemen, the third case. They're aiding the Houthis. The Houthis are also kind of an offshoot sect of Shiite, but very different in a lot of ways. In some ways, they're more Sunni than Shiite. It's a really odd thing that I don't claim to understand. But they get a little money. They've gotten some money from Iran. So now, oh my gosh, they've gotten money from Iran. And of course, Saudi Arabia is conducting a devastating hunger blockade and aerial war against the Yemeni people. Terrible, terrible situation. But it's being portrayed as Iranian aggression until you realize a couple things. The Houthis for years have been trying to get autonomy or some kind of self-rule from the central government and have been in struggle with the central government for a very, very long time. This is not some new move by Iran to now take over Yemen. That's just ridiculous. And so it crumbles. This idea of Iran on the march falls apart the moment you look at it. And yet this is what the Weekly Standard, National Review, and all these guys, Fox News, want us to believe, that after it conquers all the Middle East, it's coming here next.
I mean, do you think that any of this my adolescence, the threat of Islamic states has been sort of usually the threat of the 9/11 style Al-Qaeda, the stateless terrorists. But I get the sense that before that, obviously back in '79 or something, it wasn't about fearing those types of people. I don't know, how much of this do you think is based on religion and a fear of what is, an alien religion to the majority, I suppose, of people in the U.S.? I mean, is there any sincere... The bullshit Hitchens and atheist run amok type idea that Islam is uniquely bad in terms of a religion, I guess.
Yeah. No, I don't buy it at all. And one very good source on this, and he's been on Scott's show, is Robert Pape at the University of Chicago, who's got this institute which compiles the data on suicide terrorist attacks over the years, and he shows that there's a very, very strong relationship to occupation of the country that the suicide bomber comes from. So in other words, as Ron Paul said during his two campaigns, they're over here if they're really over here. They're over there here because we're over there. It's not they woke up one day and said, hey, America's got MTV and pornography and it's licentious and let's go knock down buildings and otherwise kill Americans because they're having too much fun. And that's not right. That's not it. That's not it. People don't fly planes into buildings because they don't like what you watch on TV or that you gamble or you men go to strip joints. That's not what's
You know who
going
else
on.
went to strip joints?
The other thing is
9/11 hijackers.
they said it themselves. Every time Osama bin Laden said it in his declaration of war against the U.S., when they've arrested and tried and convicted terrorists, and they get a chance to make a statement before the judge, they all say basically the same thing. U.S. brutality in the Middle East, support for Israel and the brutality against the Palestinians, sullying the holy places in Saudi Arabia with the military, the U.S. military, which was there up until Iraq, and then they moved into Iraq. The killing of 500,000 children, Iraqi children in the 90s, that Madeleine Albright said was worth it.
Yeah.
They always say those kinds of things. They never say you're licentious.
There may be, I mean, I know Obama's list of grievances, Osama, that happens a lot. Osama's list of grievances, I think there's one maybe about how, how degrading and filthy the West is, and then there's 12 or 15 other things about all the things you just said. I mean, it doesn't help endear us to some of these more sincerely religious people, but there is no compelling proof that any of this would be happening if somehow you could isolate the religion in a vacuum, which they try to do. That's kind of what I was wondering, is that if you think people are sincerely afraid of this foreign religion, or if it is purely cynical excuses for warmongering stuff, because they act as if every single incident where someone who professes to follow Islam does something violent happened in a politics-free vacuum, and that their motivation was purely religion, and it's.
Well, look how they cover. We had this incident in Chattanooga, right? Mm-hmm. Where this guy attacked, killed four Marines and one Navy guy. And if you watch the major cable news stations, I watch a lot of CNN because I'm a masochist, I guess. It's like a mystery. Why are they doing this? What radicalizes them? And they bring on these experts, so-called experts. Well, they get radicalized online. They're reading Al-Qaeda stuff, or they're reading ISIS stuff. And what can we do about this? We have to isolate them, isn't I think General, what's his name?
Clark.
General Clark under.
Oh my God.
Yes, we need to isolate these
that
people.
Was just.
When are they going to bring one person on? Please bring one person on to say, might it have something to do with all the bombs and the Hellfire missiles coming out of drones and the support for dictators and corrupt monarchs? Don't forget, 13 of 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
The source, the fountainhead of Wahhabism, the spreader of Wahhabism, or support for the Palestinians. Will they bring someone on and say, let me just ask the question, could it have anything to do with that? And bring them on with one of these other people.
Yeah.
But they never cross-examine the people that'll give you the official line. That's the biggest disservice to the American people. They never bring anybody on to cross-examine the people that just give this official position. What are we going to do? What did we ever do? Why would young men who go to school and have good life in the United States, why would they ever want to set off explosive in Times Square? And I'm not defending that kind of action. That's terrible, just to kill civilians. By the way, I do agree with Glenn Greenwald that the attack on that recruiting station and the naval facility do not constitute terrorism. Now, I'm not saying that means there were good actions. I don't think there were good actions. But terrorism is against civilians to achieve a political goal or social goal, not attacking military. That up till now has not been considered terrorism. And the word is just conspicuously used for anything, quote, they do, but never gets applied to anything the U.S. does or Israel does. And that's just political manipulation of language to soften up the American people so that they'll just support whatever the U.S. government does.
The word terrorism, I honestly wonder what the purpose of it is sometimes, because it really is shorthand for the type of violence that we personally don't support. That's all. I mean...
Yeah.
If it was, even if it was just specific targeting of civilians, we didn't target the civilians, though we knew they would die from this action, but we think it's worth it, also seems pretty terroristic to me, even if technically you can say, Well, that's not what we wanted, but we decided it was okay. I don't think it's a particularly useful word, even, but it's getting worse all the time.
Noam Chomsky years ago attacked the concept as to use a Randian term, it's kind of an anti-concept. It's useful for political purposes. It's not objective. The terrorist state list that the State Department keeps has always been political, manipulated. Countries or groups go on and off it, depending on the politics of the situation.
Well, the PKK, who heroically helped save the Yazidis, of course, are terrorists officially,
and the MEK, which is a violent cult of Iranians who helped Saddam Hussein attack Iran, was on it. Wasn't on it, and then they would be hiring all kinds of American ex-officials to come and speak it for big bucks. I forget who else, Howard Dean and a bunch of people. And then it was on the list. Actually, it was on the list when they were inviting these people. So these people were actually breaking the law because they were giving material support, except that Hillary and others lobbied to get them off, so they're not on the list now. And it's some crazy Marxist cult that hates the Iranian regime. It was involved, I think, in the initial revolution and then turned on the Iranian regime and basically joined up with Iraq to attack Iran. And now they're our buddies.
Do you think part of this, again, thinking more of the average sort of foolish hawk, maybe not the ringleaders of these ideas, do you think part of this is simply that it's really uncomfortable? Like, not to be self-aggrandizing that we're just so subversive and edgy, though I think we are in some ways, at least rhetorically. It's really uncomfortable to start thinking about this and thinking more about it, and the more you think about it, the more you read of history, the more disturbing it becomes. And if I express on Twitter my, disapproval of nuking Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there's a pile on. I mean, it's not a tragedy. I can handle it, but it's very clear message. Like, how can you say that? How can you suggest that you wanted all those American soldiers to be killed instead of those innocent Japanese people?
I just got that the other day on that very issue because I mentioned that. They don't. I said, well, what about the generals who were against it? So, of course, this wise guy on Twitter, I guess, came back and said, "Oh, you mean the Japanese generals?" I said, "Very funny, but wrong. No, I mean Eisenhower."
Yeah.
The top American military leadership was against the dropping of the bombs. First of all, Japan had been suing for peace. We don't need to revisit that. I see we're over time anyway. We can talk about the A-bomb droppings some other time. But
just fundamentally,
I think you're getting to a good point. And Brian Kaplan writes about this in his book, the myth of the informed voter.
Rational voter. Yeah, I should
rational voter. Have. People don't really like to go outside their comfort zone. They don't go out and seek things to shake their worldview, including about their country. They're not going to. Most people won't go and seek it out. That doesn't mean we're superior. I don't know why we do it. We're weird, but for some reason, it doesn't bother us the way it bothers most people.
Well, it does bother me.
Give most people, give them some break. Not to be too hard on them. People are busy with their lives and raising their kids. They might even figure, what can I do about it? Even if I learn that the truth is something.
Seriously, what I think.
What can I do about it? I'm one person. Wouldn't it be better to put my effort into raising my kids, making my community better? Paying attention to, fixing up my house. And in a way, that's right. There, they get results. And if they get in the political realm, but they don't get results. They're one vote out of, 100 million. And one vote doesn't count, no matter what MSNBC tells you.
Well, I mean, no matter how, you can raise your kids while also not condoning melting 180,000 Japanese people. You can actually do both. I mean, you really can. But
I know, but it's unpleasant.
It is.
Hey, what about the Indians? People won't acknowledge that we slaughtered the Indians.
It's all uncomfortable, and it doesn't have to be this sort of straw liberal, and that's why we should all feel guilty about existing and, maybe being mostly fairly white in the skin area. It just means that it's not as simple as we still get told. Everybody gets told. I'm assuming school children get told. I love that I avoided the school thing. Is that America, good, everything America does, and much of what Britain does, except for trying to keep us down, is justified because it is. And because war is a magic word that makes every single principle that you may hold dear in every other scenario not apply. And to realize that that's bullshit is to commit yourself to an entire life of being uncomfortable in all sorts of ways. And not to be self-aggrandizing, we're not in the middle of a war zone, like, we'll be okay probably, but people think you're a nut. People, like, you are a child if you don't support war. That's actually the message that I get all the time. I had some person on Twitter telling me, well, how are we going to beat Japan with rainbows and Nerf guns and, pixie dust, and you're naive and you're a child if you don't want to kill all these people. And I don't know, just a very depressing attitude.
That's why governments like to control schools. We know that.
Yeah.
And as Thomas Hodgkin put it, great libertarian from the early 19th century in England, said, "I'd rather the people be uneducated than be educated by their rulers."
So much but Cuba has free schooling as well. I mean, there's. Yeah.
I think we need to wrap it up. I don't know if there's a program following us. But...
We were left to our own devices, so I figured I'd ignore the clock for a while there.
Okay. I smell dinner waiting, so.
Yeah, actually, I need dinner too myself.
It's now 6 my time, or after 6.
Yeah, I haven't eaten.
But anyway, this was very good. I thought this was very good. I hope the group out there enjoyed it.
Quickly remind the people where to read your stuff.
The first place you'll find just about all of it is sheldonrichman.com, which is free association, my blog. I do write once a month for the Independent Institute, so that starts there rather than on, but I'll put the link up on my blog. But Reason picks up those 2 articles. I do 2 a week, including my hopefully famous TGIF article, which doesn't mean thank goodness it's Friday. It means the goal is freedom, which Cheryl, my wife, came up with. I was wondering, what's a good slogan that would use the letters TGIF? I spent a whole day and I could not think of one. Because it's a Friday when I was with B. I couldn't think of one, believe it or not. I asked her the next day, in the split second, quicker than a wink of an eye, he said, the goal is freedom. I'm thinking, duh.
That is
good. Yesterday. So, it's the goal is freedom. That's every Friday, and then there's an op-ed length, shorter piece that appears usually Wednesday. And then Reason has been picking up each of those. I think runs them like on Friday and Sunday. So if you miss it at my blog, you can always find there. Counterpunch picks up a lot of my foreign policy stuff. Liberty.me, I have a page at Liberty.me. You can find it all there if you don't want to go anywhere else. You can visit Patreon if you want to become a patron and pledge a certain amount of money per article. You're welcome to do that. Go to patreon.com/Sheldon Richman. And
yes, do that.
I would be delighted.
Do that, America.
Yeah, that would be nice. Bring a little money in from my blog. That's a neat thing because you can decide how much you want per article. And then you can also put a cap, like a monthly cap. Like I don't want to go over $20 a month, or even a lifetime cap. I see that you can put. So you can control it. Of course, you can quit at any time. There's no contract or anything. They ask for a credit card so that if you make a pledge, and I write an article, as long as the pledge is, you haven't quit it, they'll charge the card. And like I said, you can stop anytime. Anyway, if anybody is interested in supporting free association, the link is on the blog. Give it some thought. Anyway,
yes, do that, America. I haven't
talking to you again, Lucy.
I haven't done anything very exciting lately, but the Stag blog and then Lucy Stag on Twitter. So usually you can see
read her antiwar.com column.
You always say that, and I always forget to say that.
Don't miss it. Yeah, because it's a good column.
Thank you.
And that's a great site.
That's
to your column.
Yes, that is a very good site. I appreciate.
I listened to the Scott Horton show.
Yes, Scott was out there watching us, which I very much appreciate. It makes me feel very important.
I listen to everyone.
I appreciated how incredibly ranty you were today. Last week was a lot more sort of pleasant discussion. Today was kind of angry, and that actually really helps me out to know that you're out there being mad about this all the time.
Yeah.
It really does.
Because last week we talked about same-sex marriage, right?
Right, and we were all.
We were celebrating. We were upbeat. So yeah, I wasn't angry. Yeah, I get angry about the Middle East because look what people are being subjected to and what Americans are being forced to pay for, and it's just all around bad stuff. So okay.
Stay mad.
So 2 weeks from tonight, we'll do this again.
Yes. Actually, I might be having thyroid surgery, so we might have to cancel that.
Okay.
But I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Drop me a line about that so I know you're